Shalom Aleichem, everybody, first of all. How's everyone feeling? Gewaldig? Okay. So, Be'ez Hashem, what we want to do, we want to learn the Simonei HaSeder on the Mahalach, to go through one by one and to understand them. That the Simonei HaSeder, the idea of the Simonei HaSeder is actually a progression.
I wouldn't be there.
Everyone could please mute.
Yeah, but
the music.
the other-
Mute manual because they're obvious.
And the Simonei HaSeder correspond to the 15 Shara Malas and the steps of the Beis HaMikdash. So they represent stages. So what we want to do is go through a Pehsat. What is the Kiddush of each Siman of the Seder? We must say that because the Simonei HaSeder are connected to the Seder, it's not just that we do, moitzi, matzah, urchat, because this is what we have to do in order to wash, in order to eat matzah, but it has to do with the Simonei HaSeder. It's part of the progression towards the Seder. So to understand this, we have to understand that there are two pratim. There's two details here. One is that every single prat, every single detail of the Simonei HaSeder is connected specifically to the Seder itself. Even though Kadeish we do every day, every Yom Tov and every Shabbos, but there's something particular about the Kadeish that we do on this Leil HaSeder that's different than any other Kadeish that we do throughout the year. The same thing with Urchatz and Motzi and Matzah. Everything that we do, there's something very specific to that night. A Pehsat. I'm going to go through the halachas to see the Kiddush of each one, and then go through a little bit the Drush Vav from Ben Arizal, to go through the Shar Kavanas to see what the Arizal writes about these steps. And to understand the Arizal, once we understand the Pshat, we'll be able to understand more the Oimek HaSod, the depth of what the Arizal is trying to reveal to us with the Simonei HaSeder. So first of all, the whole idea of a Seder. Where does the idea of a Seder come? Where do we have this lashon that it's called a Seder? So one of the earliest sources that we have that the Leil of the night of the Seder is called Leil HaSeder is from the Rambam. In the Rambam, some of you have the Mar Mekoimus, I think. Some of you have the sources. In Hilchos Chometz and Matzah Perek Ches. So the Rambam starts, Seder Asiyas Mitzvah Seil B'Leil Chamish Aser Kachu. Rambam says this is the Seder, this is the order of this night. This is the order that we have on the night. So the Leil HaSeder, the night of the Seder, the night of a Pesach night, is called a Seder, an order, which we'll see as we get more Bohemic, God willing, till we reach finally to the level of Nirtza and beyond. We'll see that on one hand, it's a very strict Seder. Seder means it's very orderly, and it's very in an orderly fashion. One thing leads to the next, one thing leads to the next. But then ultimately, we're supposed to get to the point of the Seder, which is beyond Seder. Because Seder represents Seder Ishtalshlus. Seder represents an order of devolution, or an order of cause and effect. But because we're trying to reach a point which is the level of Yechidah, or the level of ultimate freedom, so freedom cannot be contingent on something else. It's not a cause from something else. If there's an ilah and a alul, if the alul, the effect is always dependent on the cause, it doesn't have real freedom. The ultimate freedom is only the ilah itself, the cause itself. If your freedom is dependent on something else, then it's not a true freedom. So if the idea of the Seder is to get just to the Seder, that it's just about the Seder, then we're never going to get to the ultimate idea of freedom, because we'll always be dependent on the previous thing that got us to that place. Is it clear what I'm trying to say? This is the idea of the Seder, and what we're trying to get really is to places of Bilti Seder, or Bli Seder, or Bli Gvul, something that's beyond Seder. But the way that it's organized, the way that the Madregas are reached, we go through the Seder, and at the end of the Seder, when you reach the place of Nirtza, even just a observation, if you can just look at your Seder plate and see how you look at the end of the Seder, you'll see that you start off with the Seder, maybe your hat was on the right, the right place. Everything seemed to be, if you're wearing a tie, your tie is, everything's orderly, everything's normal. Your Kaira plate is all set up very nicely. Everything's exactly organized in the exact same place. But as the Seder progresses, chaos ensues. First, the wine spills a little bit, and the matzah is all over your jacket, and then everything else. And then slowly, after you finish 4 cups of wine, your Seder plate looks like basically like a bomb just went off on the plate. But this is actually the kavanah. The kavanah is to go from order, from Seder to Bilti Seder to Bligvul. But you have to go through the starim, you have to go through the order of Gvul and the order of processes to get to a place that's beyond process to reach the Bligvul. This is the idea of the Seder. The Malbim writes in his Haggadah, Imam Yisod Musari writes that the haschala of the entire understanding of the wisdom of the seichel of the chachma of the night of the Seder is to actually understand the Seder itself. So we have to understand what is the Seder, what is this order of the Seder. We're also going to try to go through, when we get more into the teachings of Kabbalah, Pehsat-Sod, and Chassidus, we'll try to understand a little bit that there is a process of Havdalah, which is about Kadeish and Orchos, etc. We'll talk about that with the idea of separation. And then finally, there's a level of Katnos that comes after Gadlus, which means that there's a level where there's a sweetening, there's Hamtakas Adin, there's a sweetening of judgment of the place of constriction that comes afterwards. Because if you look at the whole Seder itself, there's something very perplexing. And the basic perplexing issue of the Seder is that the order really, in general, the whole Seder doesn't seem to be so consistent, because if you say that the Seder represents the 2 stages when Klal Yisrael is first in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, in the place of constriction, in a place of limitation, in a place of concealment, and then the process of the Seder is the redemption, is Magid, the redemption of that place, the Pesach versus the Perach, the redemption of speech. We're going through the Geula, so it would seem that really the Seder should be, you should start the Seder with all the harsh things. Let's say karpas, morer, all the questions. That should be the beginning of the Seder. And then the second half of the Seder should be all the answers and to eat the matzah and to celebrate already the Geula, the idea of redemption. Now, if you look, also if you have a Rambam in front of you, if you don't, you can look it up later. But I think Shlomo, one of you has made the copies, or maybe you can look at the copies. You'll see that the Rambam in Perek Ches, in Perek Ches Halacha Dalet, when the Rambam talks about when you speak about the Haggadah, so he says like this, that you say Machzer Shulchan Lefanav, he says you bring the Shulchan back, and you say Pesach Zeh Shon Oichlem Ashuma, Hashem Shapascha Abate. Why do we eat the Pesach? Because Hashem skipped over that thing. Magbi Hamar, and we pick up the Mar and we say, Mar Zeshon Oichlem Shuma, Shemeres Chayim. We eat the Mar, why? To remember that we were bitter. Our days were bitter in Egypt. And then he says, Matzah Zeshon Oichlem, why do we eat the Matzah? Until Hashem revealed himself and took us out of Egypt, and while we were eating the Matzah. So it first has Pesach, which we ate in Mitzrayim. Then it has Mar, which represents the bitterness in Egypt. And then comes the idea of Matzah, which is as we leave Egypt, which the Kesef Mishnah says is consistent with what actually happened. So first you're talking about hardship. First you're telling us about the Mar, the hardship, or you're talking about the Pesach that we ate in Egypt, and then you're saying that after a while, Hashem revealed himself and we left Egypt and then we ate the matzah as we were leaving Egypt. So that's in the progression. First, the maschel b'gnus, Messiah Meshach. You first start with the gnus, which is the hardship, which is the idea of the questions and the katnus, the constrictions, the place of limitations. And then you continue with the geula, which would make sense. However, in the actual nusach of the Haggadah of the Rambam, and that's the nusach of the Haggadah that we all have, the nusach of the Haggadah that we all have is we say Pesach, matzah, and then maror. Right? When we say, Rabbi Gamliel says, whoever doesn't say these three things on Pesach, which is a Mishnah, it says Pesach, matzah, maror. He says, say Pesach, matzah, maror. Pesach, matzah, maror doesn't seem to be consistent with the events. Pesach, matzah is already redemption. Maror is already the hardship that is the concealment and the hardship that happened before. So why do we switch? In other words, the whole order of the Leila Seder seems to be a little strange. It seems to be almost like mixed up. Like you talk a little bit about freedom, then you talk about galus. You eat matzah, then you eat maror. You don't eat matzah maror. You should eat maror then matzah. Like with the way the Rambam writes in Perek Ches, the way he describes it. So why do we have this back and forth idea? Now, Pehsat-Sod, we're going to learn, well, eventually we learn from the Kisari, we'll see that there's a very big oimik to this idea because it's talking about the katnus, the constriction that comes after the place of godless, after the place of greatness. Because in general, this is just a very big foundation that in general, the entire idea of Pesach, the idea of going out of Mitzrayim, and the idea of the Leila Seder is that Klal Yisrael was in a level that they were in the 49th level of Tumah, which the Shalach Kadeish brings down, the Al-Shech brings down, the Rechaim Kadeish brings down, the Chesed Avram brings down, many tzaddikim bring down. B'Shem Arizal, even though the Arizal himself never says this, that they were in the 49th level of Tumah, and like the Medrash says, that the angels complained and said, Halal Avodah Zarah, Halal Avodah Zarah. These are idol worshippers and these are idol worshippers. So why are you taking them out? So it says, that Hashem took us out of Egypt in a way that Hashem pushed us out of Egypt, caught us in the last moment, that undeserving, and without our avodah, without our work, without our participation so much, that we were taken from a place of exile, a place of constriction, and we were gifted the gift of freedom. This is what Pesach represents. Pesach is a Yom Tov, and that's why Pesach in the Torah, when the Torah talks about Pesach, it says, when it talks about the Sfira Soim, it says, Sfarta Lachem Machas HaShabbos, that you should count Sfira from the day after Shabbos. So we know that there was a big machlekes, the Gemara Menachos brings out, a big machlekes in the Stoikim and the Prushim, that the Stoikim said that Machas HaShabbos, the day after Shabbos, is Shabbos Bereshis. And we say that no, that when it says in Machas HaShabbos, you should count from the day after Shabbos, it actually refers to Pesach. Okay, it could refer to Pesach. Shabbos can refer to Pesach, because Yom Tov is also called Shabbos, like even Yom Kippur is called Shabbos Shabbosim. It could be called Shabbos. But why make this confusion? Why call Pesach Shabbos if you want to tell us that we have to start counting Sfira from the day after Pesach, from the day after the first day of Pesach? And the answer is because Pesach is a madrega of Shabbos. Pesach is a level of Shabbos. What's the difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos? Yom Tov is a level where is Mekadosh V'Kaima, that Mekadosh Yisrael V'Azmanim, that we are Mekadosh, we sanctify the new moon. And through sanctifying the new moon, we create time, we sanctify time, and then we know when Yom Tov is. Shabbos is Mekadosh V'Kaima. Shabbos, the Kedusha comes on its own. The sacredness comes on its own. Whether you count, whether you don't count, Shabbos comes on its own, which means that the Kedusha, the holiness that comes down on Pesach, is a gift. That's why it's connected to the world of Chesed, it's connected to Avram Avinu, it's connected to Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud Kei and the Vav Kei, Yisro Shemayim V'Sagal Haaretz. It's connected to the energy flow, the flow that comes down from the divine, direct. It's not that we're participating and we deserve it and we work on it and there's avoided. No, it comes down to us. So that means that even though we're Alola Avodah Zara, even though we're stuck in our own darkness and we're stuck in our own klipa, in our own place of limitations and constrictions, comes Pesach night and we're gifted immediately with Kadeish. The moment we say Kiddush, we're gifted with godless. We're gifted with greatness. This is a gift. And as every gift, if a person doesn't appreciate the gift and a person doesn't work on then receiving the gift that's given to them, they squander the gift and the gift disappears. So sometimes a person has a beautiful Seder and the next morning they wake up and they say, okay, what did I do last night? Nothing happened. Possible, because you were gifted everything and you didn't go to sleep like a mensch. You didn't assimilate that high that you were gifted to make sure that the next morning will be different. So the gift is given to us, is granted to us from above. This is what happens on Pesach night. So everything that's the whole structure of the evening, whole structure of the Leila Seder, is that we're gifted godless. We're gifted greatness. We'll talk about what the godless means, and there's godless Rishon and godless Sheni, godless Shlishi. There's many different levels of this type of godless of greatness. But essentially it means we're gifted clarity, openness, emunah, b'tachin, our minds are clear, it makes sense, we feel lifted and open, expansive, and broken out of all our shells and limitations. This is what the godless is given to us. This is what Pesach is given to us Pesach night. Now, the Simonei HaSeder themselves, the actual Simonei HaSeder, we're going to go to each one, the prati, is each one in very great detail. But the Simonei HaSeder starts out like this, that there are 15 Simonei HaSeder. Who composed these 15 Simonei HaSeder? So according to all estimations, it's connected with the house of Rashi. Now, one of the earliest sources is Machzor Vitri, which is attributed to Talmidei Rashi, and they bring down the Simonei HaSeder, these Simonei HaSeder. Others quoted from Shmuel Peliza, one of the authors of the Balei HaTosfos. And then there's other sources that say that it's actually from Yosef Tov Ilam, which was one of the Rebbes of Rashi, one of Rashi's teachers. And in Seder Rashi, it brings down, in Simon 435, it brings down this. Yosef Yom Tov is actually also the one that composed the piyut, the final piyut of Chasal Seder Pesach L'Chasei. So it's very possible he's actually the one that was Mesader and created these 15 stars. Now, why was it composed? Why was the Simonei HaSeder composed then and not earlier? This is a technical shaila, but we have to understand why not. So we'll see. Again, I want to do the Rambam, because the Rambam is one of the first clear Haggadahs that we have in the world. The earliest Haggadahs we have is from Amram Gon, and then from Saadia Gon, and then from the Rambam. These are the earliest Haggadahs that we have. So if you look at the Rambam, we know, we're going to talk more at length in each simon, what's the difference between the Rambam's way of doing it and the way that it's classically done today. But one thing to see is that...
What is she? What is this?
I think it's for men only. And then Skelly pops in.
One thing to see
It has to be more job than this.
is that... and then there's Yachatz. Yachatz is when we divide the matzah. We're going to get into when we talk about Yachatz, but this, for example, the Rambam doesn't have Yachatz in the beginning of the Haggadah. The Rambam, if you look at Perek Ches Halacha Vav, he writes, right before you make the bracha. To make the bracha, you break one of the matzahs, then you have paras. Then you have prusa, you have a broken matzah, but you don't actually say the entire Haggadah on a broken matzah. Another interesting thing, if you look through the Gemara, which we'll go very quickly, and if you have the Aver Psachim, and if you don't, you can just follow along with what I'm going to tell you, but you could just follow along with the Mishnahs. You'll see something interesting. The final chapter in the Sechtas Psachim is called Aver Psachim. And the Aver Psachim is where the Gemara deals with with the entire story of what we do on Pesach night. But the Mishnah says like this, the Mishnah, the second Mishnah, so the second Mishnah says like this. So the Mishnah is giving us an example, an explanation of how we actually, how do we celebrate the Seder on the Seder night. So this is the Chachmei Mishnah, the times of the Mishnah, 2,500 years ago. The Chachmei Mishnah are developing how we actually celebrate the Seder. So they say like, first, Mazgal HaKosishin, you fill up the first cup. And then you make Kiddush. And that's a machloikis, that's an argument of Bisham Misilul. If you first V'varach Al-Yoyim, V'achach V'varach Al-Yayin, or V'varach Al-Yayin, V'achach V'varach Al-Yayin. What do you do first? But everyone holds, you fill up the first cup of wine, and you make Kiddush. We're going to talk about this because this is something that we all practice. We all make Kiddush before we wash our hands. That's the way we celebrate the Seder. This is contrast to a minig Ashkenaz that some Jews do, and we'll see soon in Shulchan Aruch, where on Friday nights, some people actually wash their hands before they make Kiddush. They wash their hands from Hotzi, then they make Kiddush, and then they eat the bread. But this we'll see soon in Shulchan Aruch, we don't do on the night of the Seder. On the night of the Seder, we all start with Kiddush. This is going to be very important. Kiddush, sanctifying, creating sacred space, sacred time, starting off the position, starting off from Kiddush, L'chachma, starting off from a place of Kedusha. We're going to talk about this, but the first thing is that we do is we make Kiddush. Then the Mishnah, the third Mishnah says, then the second Mishnah starts saying that first says you make Kiddush and a cup of wine. Then it says you start eating the pas, the bread, the matzah, the chazeres, the charoises, the shnei tafshilin, the food. At times of the Beis Hamikdash time, you also bring the gufa shel Pesach, you bring the offering of the Pesach, which suggests that this was all done with the first cup of wine. They drank the first cup, and they did all that. Then the next Mishnah says, Mazgal sheni, they filled up a second cup, and here v'kana ben shoyl aviv, and here the child asked the question of Manishtana Laila Zed. The child asked the question of Manishtana. So, you know, the very famous question on the Manishtana is, what's the very famous question on the Manishtana? The most famous question is, how does the child know what's going to be in the end of the Seder? The child asks a question and says, tonight we're going to eat only matzah. All nights a year we eat chametz and matzah. Tonight we're only eat matzah. All the nights a year we eat all types of bitter herbs. Tonight we're only eat mar. All nights a year we don't dip. We dip once. Tonight we dip twice. How does he know that? How does he know what's going to be at the end of the Seder? We asked the four questions at the beginning of the Seder, before the meal. So the answer is that according to the Mishnah, the times in the Mishnah, it seems that they made Kiddush on the first cup of wine, they washed, they ate the entire meal. After the meal, they filled up a second cup. After the meal, they filled up a second cup. Now the child asks a question on an entire meal that just happened. And he's not a prophet. He just experienced everything. That's what happens with the second cup. And you finish the entire Haggadah, and like the Mishnah continues the entire Haggadah. Then the next Mishnah says, Mazi Lokoi Shlishi, the third cup you fill up and you bench. And the fourth cup, you say Hallel. And that's the way the order was done, apparently, in those times. So the meal was eaten before the Haggadah. Things changed. Apparently, things changed during the times of the Gemara. Why did it change during the times of the Gemara? Because it turns out that if you're going to eat an entire meal with matzah and mar and the whole thing, at the time you're going to start filling up the second cup, most of the children will be sleeping, and probably a lot of the adults also be already too tired to start not talking about the Haggadah. So they changed it around. They said, you know, let's change it around. Where do we see that it's changed around? So there's a Gemara in Kuf Tes Vav Amud Beis. The 115, the Gemara says like this. Why do we push away the table? Which means, why don't we eat right away the meal? So the children should ask the question. The Gemara says, Abaya, some say that he was a young child, was sitting in front of the Rabbi. He saw that they took the table away, and they weren't going to eat. All of a sudden, they're starting to ask the 4 questions. He says, why are we doing this? We didn't yet eat. In other words, Abai is saying we should eat, which was the custom that was done up until then. So he says, he said, now you just said your manishtana. This is the manishtana. You just asked the question. In other words, this was the time when things changed from the custom to do this in this way, which is to have the Seder, to eat and then do the Haggadah, to change now to the new way, which is the way we practice today, which is that we do everything. First we do the Haggadah, and at the end, and then we do the whole Haggadah, and then we wash and eat the matzah, maror, etc., the whole Shulchan Aruch. That's the custom the way we have it now. So now we're going to start with Kadeish. Okay? So let's start with Kadeish. What is Kadeish? Kadeish, so there's let's talk about the Pshat in Kadeish, the halachic idea of Kadeish. And then I'll be the Remez. And then we'll do the side maybe, God willing, next year. So okay, let's talk about the Remez first of Kadeish, and we'll talk about the Pshat. The Remez of Kadeish means like this. What is the idea of Kadeish? In order for us to begin any process, we have to first dedicate ourselves. We have to commit ourselves. You want something to experience? You want to experience something? You want to have a certain type of experience tonight, on the night of the Seder? You have to carve out something sacred. So Kaddish means Kadeish, to sanctify, to carve out sacred space, to say that I am now dedicating myself for the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, till beyond time. I'm now dedicating myself to the process of what the Seder can achieve. That's the first step that we have to do. We have to believe and declare, verbally declare, this place is now sacred. This is now, I'm creating the sacred space for this experience to occur. This is what the idea of Kaddish in general means. So the first avodah, the first type of work that a person has to do is to start off and say, I'm a Kaddish this. Now, Kaddish generally, the idea of Kiddush, of sacred, it really comes from the idea of Chodesh Zelachem, which is the first mitzvah that Klal Yisrael received in Mitzrayim. The first mitzvah that we received in Egypt, even before we received the mitzvah of Korban Pesach and all the mitzvahs that we received after leaving Mitzrayim, as we leave Mitzrayim, the first thing is Chodesh Zelachem Rosh Chodoshim, that Kaddish, that you should sanctify the new moon. This is the first mitzvah, which means on one level, the idea of sanctification of time, that the basic difference between someone that's a slave and someone that's a free person is whether someone owns their own time. Do you own your time, or is time owned by somebody else, or by something else, or by other circumstances? Hashem gave Klal Yisrael the first mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the new moon, sanctification of the new moon. The idea is that we have the ability to sanctify time, that we're free people, and we decide how we're going to spend our time. We decide how we're going to spend this space. What is this space going to be? It doesn't matter the external circumstances. It doesn't matter what's going on around in the world, in the outside world. How we have the potential right now at every moment to sanctify this particular moment and this particular space. This is the mitzvah of Kiddush of Kiddush HaChodesh, the basic understanding of the idea of Kiddush HaChodesh, the sanctification of owning time and owning our space. And this is essential. This is very essential for us to grow, to move, to develop, to own ourselves, to own our time. This is more the Rambam, and we'll talk a little bit why the idea of Kaddish is connected with wine, particularly. And there's going to be different levels of godless, different levels of expansive mind, and higher levels of consciousness. And the Arizal is going to tie them to either to Moichin of Abba, to intelligence that's connected to the father, which is Chachma, or Moichin de Ima, intelligence connected to the mother. So very quickly, and then we'll go this much more detail, is that Moichin de Abba is going to be connected to Matzah, the intelligence of the mind that's connected to Chachma, to Abba, to the father, will be connected to Matzah itself. And in Matzah itself, we're going to have three matzahs, which will correspond to Chachma, Bina, and Das. And therefore, the middle matzah, which is Bina, is broken. That's going to be the matzah, so we'll talk when we get to the matzah. And the 4 cups of wine correspond to the 4 levels of moichin, the 4 levels of intelligence, which is moichin de ima, which is moichin of chachma de ima, of bina de ima, and of chesed de ima, and gvura de ima. Because in das, there's das chesed and das gvura. Again, I'm just telling this very quickly, and then we'll understand what exactly this means, and also experientially, what does it actually mean to experience the moichin of ima versus the moichin of awa. So this is the way we're going to start the Seder. We're going to start with Kadeish. Now, what is the Chiddush of Kadeish versus Kiddush that we do every Yom Tov? So, first of all, there is the halacha that the Rambam brings down at Tov Ayin Gimel, which is the Rambam brings down that that if it's possible, albeit it's not mini Chabad, but if it's possible, that you shouldn't fill up your cup yourself, the cup of wine, but you should have someone else fill it up for you. That when you fill up the cup of wine for the Leila Seder, the Kiddush should not be done with your own filling up the cup of wine, but it should be filled up with someone else. Someone else should fill it up for you. That's one difference between Kiddush of Shabbos and Yom Tov versus Kiddush of Pesach. Another difference, another Kiddush of Pesach, another novelty about Pesach is the Chidar writes, and this is also the Varm Shal Tam, that on Pesach, every Kiddush that we say on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, we say Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. If you don't say Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim on Yom Tov, it says you're Yoitza, but not on Pesach. On Pesach, you must say Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's also very obvious. Then there's also the Chiddush of what the Rosh brings down. There's a Truvas HaRosh that the Rambam brings down in Shulchan Aruch, that on Pesach night, we should not wash before we do Kiddush, even though there's a custom. On many other Shabbosim and Yom Tovim for people to wash before they do Kiddush, on Pesach night, we should make sure that we start off with Kiddush and not washing our hands. That's another Kiddush that we have on the Kiddush of Pesach night versus the Kiddush of every other time of the year. This is in the Simonei HaSeder, al pi halacha, al pi pshat. So we have that it has to be done derech eres, has to be done like in a matter of royalty. So someone else pours the wine for you. And also that you start off with Kiddush, not with washing your hands. Now this also works very well al pi pnimius, according to the Sod. Because what is the idea of Kiddush? We started before, that what is the idea of Pesach night? Pesach night, we don't start with avodah. We don't start with work, with engaging ourselves and saying, I'm preparing myself, I'm processing myself and getting to the place, and now I receive this gift. No, Pesach night, we start off with the gift. Then we continue with the assimilation of the gift. So if I would wash my hands first, so generally in spiritual work, you would think that first comes sur meira, first comes the negation of negative, and then comes vasaytoid, then comes the positive. First you get rid of the negative. So if you're washing your hands, and washing your hands represents the idea of getting rid of negativity, or you're getting rid of tumah, of impurity that exists in the hands, whether literally or ritually, you're getting rid of some of the impurities. So if the idea of first comes Sur Meira. So first you should do Sur Meira. You should get rid of the negative. And you should specifically on Pesach night, first do wash your hands, like some custom people to do this on every Shabbos. And then do Kiddush. But the Shulchan Aruch rules that no, specifically not on Pesach night. On Pesach night, we should all, now there's a technical reason for that because you're going to wash, it's going to be half-sick, etc. But there's the pneumius reason for that is because Pesach night, we want to start with Kiddush. You want to start and say, could be my hands are dirty, could be my hands are tameh, could be I'm impure, halal avodah zarah, halal avodah zarah, I'm idol worshiper, and he's an idol worshiper, I'm still stuck in my exile, I'm still stuck in a place of constriction, I have nothing, and I have no possibility to extricate myself from this position. Still, I'm starting off with Kiddush, and I'm saying, Kivana v'chartem v'kolamim, Hashem has gifted us and chosen us and giving us the ability to reach our freedom. That's how I'm starting. Because the posture, the way I want to start Pesach night, is I want to start with Kiddush. I want to start from the highest level. I don't want to start with negating something that's negative, but I want to start from the highest level of Kiddush. Now, one of the reasons why the Arizal writes this is he says that if you start, I mean, this is like a more metaphysical idea, but let's try to a little more an oisius of Chassidus and more in Nefesh Adam to understand this. He says that if you start sometimes with katnus, with smallness, there's a possibility of a unique lichitzonim, that the negative side receives, and therefore you get stuck in the negative side and you never can get to the place of godless. But if you start from godless, you eliminate everything first, and then you can reintegrate things. So let's talk about this, like say in terms of a person that's trying to break themselves out of like they're in a stupor, they're in a bad place, they're in a funk, they're in a place that they can't grab themselves out of that situation. So one way to think about it is, okay, so let's go through slowly. Let's do the process slowly. We'll talk to the person. You'll give them encouragement. You try to break them out of the situation, and slowly they'll break out of the situation, and they'll find some type of redemption, and they'll be healed. That's one way of thinking about it. The problem with that is that sometimes when you gribble, when you involve yourself with dirt, you get dirty itself. And you get this stuck in the mud. It's like, I don't know if this is an analogy, but I was thinking maybe, sometimes a car gets stuck in mud, like the tire gets stuck in the traction. So what do? You rev up the engine to make more mud. So all you do is you make a bigger mess, and now everyone is dirty. So it's sometimes when it's stuck in the mud and you can't get the car out, using the same techniques of slowly moving the wheel and pushing is not going to work. You need like a bulldozer to push the car out and then start from scratch. This is the same thing in avodah, in a person's spiritual work. When a person's stuck in kleinigkeit, in narishkeit, in smallness, in constriction, in details, in the mud, in the guck, and they can't really climb out of the situation, pushing it, moving it, turning another wheel is just going to make everything more messy. There's going to be a lot of unique lichitzonim, a lot of other powers are going to get a lot of energy from it. You're not going to really get the person out of the mess. Sometimes you need a force that's so beyond anything that the person's experienced just to push the whole posture of the person and induce the person to another state of reality. Pick up the person from here and put him in someplace else. That's what the Leila Seder is. That's the night of the Seder. The night of the Seder is we're not going to start cleansing ourselves and working on ourselves and start to elevate ourselves and do Sur Meira and get rid of that and get rid of the other thing and wash our hands and make sure, okay, now we're going to be ready for Kadeish. We're going to say, Hashem, I'm ready for you to pull me out of my place of constriction. And this is what happens when I say Kiddush. When I say Kiddush, when I say Kadeish, and I make Kiddush on Seder night, Hashem gifts us greatness, godless vision. He gives us a godless that we're all of a sudden pulled from our place of constriction and limitations and everything that's bothering us and troubling us in a place that we feel small and constricted, and also we're thrust into a higher state. And that's how we start to say that. We start to say there, Kaddish. We start to say there that we're like a Kohen Gadol, like the Tzaddik, That's that entering in the Holy of Holies, that we dress in our finest garbs. Some people wear white, like the Kohen Gadol, the high priest in the Holy of Holies, dress with nice clothes to fill the whole table with the most expensive jewelry that we have and the finest dishes. Say, Hashem, you just induced us to a state of Bnei Malachim, children of kings and holy priests and Kohen Gedolim. And now we're going to begin the Seder. And then, of course, we're going to have to make sure that we also go revisit the smallness and the constriction and limitations and the places that count us, so we don't just fool ourselves and never really grow. But the beginning of the Seder is that we start with Kadeish. We're induced to a higher state of Kiddusha, of holiness. Okay, I think we're going to continue with Hashem tomorrow.